What happens when a CEO dressed like a tired delivery driver gets told he's not worthy of a fresh bowl of soup? Mason Steller never planned to take over his father's 12-location soup and sandwich chain. But when the man passed unexpectedly 2 years ago, Mason stepped in. He'd kept the business growing, added online ordering, and brought in a new marketing team. On paper, things looked solid, but complaints were starting to pile up, subtle ones that didn't show up in spreadsheets: a cold review here, a refund request there. One person said the food tasted like it had been sitting for hours. Another mentioned a manager brushing off a request for a replacement. Mason didn't want to micromanage, but something felt off. He'd never personally met most of the store staff. His father had always handled that part. So Mason made a decision. He would visit each store as a customer. No staged meetings, no advance notice, just him, a fake name, a delivery jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low. He had a professional makeup artist age him slightly and darken his skin tone just enough to change his look. Add a slight southern drawl and a fake ID with the name Royce Taylor, and no one would guess he was the man who signed their paychecks. The first few visits had been uneventful. Some locations ran tight, clean, and friendly. Others, not so much. Now he was walking into store number 7, a medium-sized spot tucked between a laundromat and a gym in a suburban strip mall. It was 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lunch rush over. 2 customers inside. He stepped up to the counter where a young cashier, barely 17, leaned on one elbow, scrolling through her phone. Mason cleared his throat. She looked up. "Yeah, I'll take the chicken and wild rice soup, medium bowl." She tapped lazily on the screen. "Anything else?" "Nope." "Name, Royce." He paid and moved to the side. Behind the counter, a heavyset man in his 40s with a stained apron stood over the soup station, stirring slowly. Mason recognized him from HR files. Chef Darren, kitchen lead. Not technically a manager, but he'd been with the company since year 1. Darren ladled the soup into a bowl without looking, then slid it onto the counter. Mason lifted it and frowned. The top was congealed, the color off. He grabbed a spoon, stirred it once, and felt his stomach turn. "Cold in the middle. Hey, sorry, but this isn't hot. Think I could get a fresh bowl?" Darren didn't look up. "It's soup. It's fine." Mason blinked. "I think it's been sitting a while." Darren finally looked at him, flat eyes, no emotion. "We don't make fresh bowls on request." "If you don't like it, don't eat it." Mason stood still, caught off guard. "I just want it heated." "You gonna eat it or not?" Darren snapped. "You're holding up the line." There was no line. Mason stepped aside, heart pounding, not from anger yet, but from disbelief. This man had been with the company for over a decade. His father had once called him one of the originals. But here he was, refusing to serve a warm bowl of soup to a paying customer, and no one else batted an eye. The teenage cashier was back on her phone. A younger guy in the kitchen chopped lettuce without looking up. Mason sat at a corner table, watching. Over the next 40 minutes, he saw Darren ignore 2 more customers who asked questions about the menu. One woman asked if the tomato bisque was gluten-free. "I don't know." "Google it," was the answer she got. A girl in her 20s stepped out from the back, wiping her hands on her apron. She moved quickly, checked the soup temps, and turned the dial on one of the warmers. Mason noticed she started wiping down tables that hadn't been touched in hours. She greeted customers with energy, even though the others barely spoke. Her name tag read Valerie. Mason threw away the untouched soup and walked outside. He sat in his car for a while, staring at the steering wheel. "How many other stores are like this?" he muttered. He pulled out his phone, not to call anyone, but to make a note. Name Darren. Issue: refused to make fresh soup, rude to customers. Then he typed another one. Name Valerie, good energy, cleaned without being told. Needs follow-up. He had 5 more stores to visit, but this location had just jumped to the top of the list. Mason wasn't done here, not even close. Mason didn't go back the next day. He waited 4 days, long enough for no one to remember him, or at least not care. He changed his jacket to an old postal service windbreaker, swapped his hat for a trucker cap with a local towing company's logo, and added a slight limp. This time, he showed up at exactly 4:05 p.m., a lull between the afternoon trickle and dinner prep. He walked in and sat at the far table without ordering anything, Just watched. Valerie was back, this time working the front register. She spoke quickly and clearly. Every customer got her full attention. Names were remembered. Preferences too. A man in his 60s walked in, wearing a faded veteran's cap. "Hi, Mr. Langley," she said before he spoke. "Tomato, basil, and rye toast, right?" He smiled like it made his day. "You got a good memory on you." "I just like people," she shrugged. But even as she kept the front running smoothly, Mason saw her glance toward the back every few minutes. Not with worry, more like anticipation. Darren appeared 10 minutes later, walking in from the alley behind the store, holding a fast food bag and a large soda. He dropped them on the prep table, took one bite of a cheeseburger, then walked straight to the sink and started rinsing pans from the lunch rush. Without gloves, Mason leaned forward slightly. Valerie noticed too. "Darren, you didn't wash your hands yet." Darren didn't look up. "I rinsed my fingers on the way in." She hesitated. "The sanitizer's out, I just marked it." "You think I need you to tell me how to clean dishes now?" Valerie looked down, tightened her lips, and turned back to the register without another word. That was the first crack Mason saw in her. Not fear exactly, but fatigue, not physical, emotional, the kind that builds up when no one has your back. A new customer walked in, a teenage boy with a basketball under his arm. Valerie greeted him, took his order, and made light conversation while she rang him up. The boy asked about the chili. She turned to the soup station, grabbed a ladle, and tested the batch. She frowned. "Darren, this chili's cold." He didn't even glance over. "It's fine, the warmer's on." "It's not warm enough. It's barely—" "You want to grab a thermometer and pretend you're in culinary school, go ahead. Otherwise, leave it." She looked like she was going to argue, then caught herself. "I'm gonna switch it out," she said instead. Darren lifted his head finally. "If you touch that pot, you're staying late to clean the station." She stared at him for a full second. "Fine," she said quietly. Then to the customer. "Sorry, we're out of chili for now. Want to try the black bean?" Mason stood and walked outside. He didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. He paced in front of the gym 2 doors down, then came back in 10 minutes later, this time approaching the counter. "I'll grab a sandwich," he said. "Roast turkey on sourdough." Valerie nodded. "Any toppings or just classic?" "Classic's fine." She asked for the name. He gave her the same one, Royce. "You were here a few days ago, right?" she said, narrowing her eyes slightly. "You had the hat from the shipping company." He paused. "Yeah, soup wasn't great, I remember. I'm sorry about that." She leaned closer, voice quiet. "I'm trying to fix some things here, just takes time." Mason didn't reply. He just stepped aside and waited. From behind the prep line, Darren said loudly, "He's back. The soup critic." Valerie didn't respond. Mason waited until the sandwich came out, thanked her, and left without eating it. That night, he called HR and asked for Valerie's file. Hired 11 months ago, no write-ups. High customer survey ratings, 3 commendations. He asked about Darren, long history, no formal complaints, 1 note from a former assistant manager that said, "Can be difficult when questioned." That was 2 years old, nothing since. He closed the file and called in a favor. The next morning, a field compliance officer arrived unannounced at the store for a routine inspection. Nothing dramatic, just temperature logs, sanitation checks, and a quiet review of the camera system. By 2:00 p.m., Mason had the footage. He watched Valerie restock the front, check labels, and clean her station without prompting. He saw Darren throw away a full tray of turkey that had been left out too long without logging it, without telling anyone. He saw him take calls on his personal phone while standing over the hot table. He saw him ignore every customer question Valerie had to handle. But what got Mason's attention most was the way the younger staff avoided Darren entirely. No one asked him for help. They waited for Valerie to fix things every time. That evening, Mason returned in his real identity. He wore a gray button-down, no disguise, walked in at 6:15 p.m., just after the dinner hour started. The store wasn't busy, 3 tables occupied, but the moment he walked through the door, Valerie looked up and froze. She didn't recognize him from the first visit. She recognized him from the company's founder's wall. She'd seen his face once in an employee newsletter. He headed straight to the counter. "Valerie, why yes, my name's Mason Steller," she blinked. "You're the I own this company. Or what's left of it." Behind the counter, Darren stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands slowly. "What's going on?" Mason didn't look at him. "Valerie, could you step outside with me for just a minute?" She nodded, wide-eyed. Once outside, Mason spoke quietly. "You've been holding this place together." "I've tried," she said. "I need to ask you something directly. Don't worry about protocol, just answer honestly." She nodded. "What's going on with Darren?" She looked down. "He doesn't listen. He shuts people down. He won't follow safety. I've covered for him more times than I should have." "Why?" "Because he's been here longer than any of us. He acts like he's untouchable." Mason was silent for a moment. "You're not covering for him anymore." They went back inside. Mason walked behind the counter, past the prep station and into the back. Darren was at the sink again, sleeves up. "Darren," the man turned, drying his hands. "Yeah, you're done here. Hand me your apron." Darren's expression didn't change. "What? You're being terminated." "Effective immediately." "For what?" "For violating safety procedures, refusing customer service, and threatening to retaliate against an employee for doing the right thing. We have it all on video. You've had chances to improve. You didn't." Darren stared at him, jaw tight. "I've been here for 14 years. And you've used that time to make people afraid to speak up. That ends now." Darren pulled off his apron and dropped it on the counter. "You'll regret this." "No," Mason said. "I regret not doing it sooner." Darren left without another word. Valerie stood near the register, hands clasped tightly. Mason walked over. "I'm promoting you to interim shift lead. Starting now, you'll get management training next week. Your pay goes up by $3 an hour." She blinked fast. "Sir, you've earned this. You kept standards alive in a place that had none." She nodded slowly. "Thank you. I'm not done," he said. "We're hiring 2 more team members here. Immediately. You've been doing the work of 3 people. That ends today." She looked like she might cry, but didn't. Mason turned to the rest of the staff, who had gathered around quietly. "This store is getting a second chance. If you're willing to work hard and treat people right, you'll have mine." No one said anything at first, then a kid in the back said, "Thank you, sir." Mason nodded once. Then he stepped outside and called HR. "We'll need someone to cover the kitchen for a week," he said, "and start pulling footage from the next location." There were still 5 stores left, and now he knew exactly what to look for. Mason returned to headquarters the next morning with a different presence about him. He didn't speak much during the executive meeting, just listened. His head of operations reviewed weekly numbers, mentioned a dip in Store 7's evening check averages, and recommended adjusting the promo banners for that district. Mason cut in. "We're not changing banners," he said. "We're changing people." No one responded. Mason turned to the head of training. "I want a manager development program launched by the end of the month. We're building from the inside out. Start with Store 7. She nodded, scribbling notes. "And make sure Valerie gets a mentor," he added. "Someone outside that district. I want her supported, not babysat." He left the meeting early. There were still 5 locations he hadn't seen, and he didn't trust reports anymore. By Friday, he was parked outside Store 3, an old brick-front location near a light rail station. This one had history. His father used to visit it personally every other week. Mason had only been inside twice, both times during grand reopenings. It had always been one of the top performers. Inside, the store looked exactly as remembered. Polished tile floors, exposed wood beams, chalkboard menu. But the energy was flat. One cashier leaned against the wall, rubbing her temple, while a second employee mopped half-heartedly near the drink station, barely moving the mop head. 2 customers sat at opposite ends of the dining area in silence. Mason stepped up to the counter and glanced at the young man behind it. His name tag read Josh. He didn't greet Mason, just waited. Mason ordered a turkey chili and a spinach salad, paid in cash, and stepped aside. The salad came out quickly. The chili never did. After 7 minutes, Mason asked quietly, "Hey, did the chili get missed?" Josh didn't look up. "It's on the way." 3 more minutes passed. Then a man in his late 30s appeared from the back, holding a bowl in one hand and a phone in the other. He wore a black pullover with a company logo stitched on the chest. His eyes were on his screen. "Chili for Royce," he muttered, setting it down. Mason took the bowl and sat by the window. The chili was hot, but the bowl was sloppily filled, the rim stained with a greasy streak. The bread that came with it was hard, like it had been sitting out all day. He took a bite anyway, flavorless. He watched the man in the pullover walk over to the mopping employee and say something under his breath. The employee rolled his eyes and walked to the back. Mason stood and walked toward the counter again. Josh was gone. A woman with thick glasses had taken his place. "Excuse me," Mason said. "Is the manager around?" She looked toward the back office. "Mr. Boyd's here," she said. "Can I speak with him?" She hesitated, then disappeared into the back. A few seconds later, the man in the pullover came out again, phone still in hand. "Yeah. I didn't get your name earlier," Mason said. "Clark Boyd. I run this location." Mason nodded. "I was just wondering how long you've been with the company." 6 years, he said. "Something wrong with your order?" "Not exactly. Just curious if you do quality checks during the afternoon shift." "We do them every 2 hours." "Why?" Mason held up the bread. "This was like a rock," Clark shrugged. "It's complimentary. We don't guarantee freshness on the side bread." Mason stared at him. "You don't guarantee freshness. It's not a sales item. It's just part of the bundle." Mason set the bread down and stepped back. "Thanks," he said. "Appreciate the insight." He left the store and walked a full block before turning back. He needed to see the team dynamic without customer-facing filters. He pulled out his phone, called a regional supervisor, and asked for access to the internal camera feed. By late afternoon, he was watching the team from his laptop in a parked car. Clark spent more time in the back office than on the floor. When he did appear, it was usually to hand off tasks with little explanation. Twice, he gave vague instructions about closing procedures, then disappeared. Josh spent most of his time scrolling on his phone behind the counter, only occasionally looking up if a customer walked in. The mopping employee never returned to the floor, but what caught Mason's attention was a moment around 5:15 p.m. A middle-aged woman walked in with a tired look and a name badge clipped to her coat from a nearby hospital. She ordered, then asked quietly if she could substitute the soup in the combo for a different one because of dietary restrictions. Josh told her no. She asked again, explaining she had a sodium sensitivity from a recent surgery. Josh shrugged and said, "We can't do custom substitutions. Try somewhere else if that's a problem." Clark was in the background, leaning against the back wall, watching the exchange. He didn't intervene. The woman left without ordering. Mason closed the laptop. He didn't wait until evening. He walked back into the store in his real clothes, no disguise, and asked to speak with Clark. The team looked up, confused but not alarmed. Clark came out of the back office holding a sandwich. "You again," he said. "Something else wrong with the bread?" "No," Mason said calmly. "I'm Mason Steller. I own this company." Clark blinked. "Right. I'm not here for a meeting," Mason continued. "I've been watching how you run this store. You're done here. You can't be serious. You ignored a customer who asked for a simple dietary accommodation. You allowed your cashier to dismiss her. You've been on your phone more than on the floor. You're not managing. You're coasting." Clark looked around as if expecting backup. No one spoke. "I've been with this brand 6 years," he said, "and it shows in all the wrong ways. You're being terminated immediately. Step away from the register." Clark opened his mouth but didn't argue. He walked to the back, grabbed a jacket, and left. Mason turned to Josh. "Did you know who that woman was earlier?" he asked. Josh shook his head. "She's an ICU nurse. She works 18-hour shifts and came in here hoping for one decent meal. You told her to go somewhere else." Josh didn't answer. "You're suspended for 3 days, unpaid. And when you come back, you'll be training with a different team. If you don't want to be here, don't come back." He turned to the woman in glasses. "What's your name?" "Melinda. You're the only one I saw trying to keep anything going in here. I'm assigning a temporary field manager to support you. You'll oversee this location until we find a new GM." Her eyes widened. "I've never managed. You know how to show people respect. That's more than anyone else did today." She nodded once. Mason stepped out of the store and made a call to HR. Clark Boyd and Josh need to be coded as terminated and suspended respectively. Send over a field captain to stabilize Store 3, and add Melinda to the interim lead program with Valerie. He hung up and leaned against his car. The deeper he looked, the more he uncovered. Not just incompetence but indifference, the kind that seeps into a culture when no one's paying attention. He had 4 more stores to visit, and he was no longer hoping for the best. He was preparing for the worst. Mason sat at his desk after hours, office empty around him, lights dimmed. A legal pad sat in front of him, half covered in scribbled names, arrows, and notes. 7 stores visited, 2 terminated managers, 2 newly promoted employees. One culture that, if left unchecked for another year, would have decayed beyond repair. He exhaled through his nose and crossed out a line, then he picked up the phone. "Get me the district leads on a call tomorrow morning. No agenda, I just want real answers." He hung up and leaned back. His father used to say, "A company's soul lives in its break room, not in its boardroom." Mason never understood that until now. At 9 the next morning, he walked into store 8, small footprint, minimal seating, mostly takeout orders and delivery drivers cycling in and out. The manager on record was a woman named Katrina Lowe. Tenure, 4 years. Style, unknown. He entered as a customer. No disguise this time, just jeans, a faded hoodie, and a quiet presence. A teenage girl passed him without greeting, eyes glued to a tablet. The person behind the counter, early 20s, maybe was busy double bagging an order. Mason stepped up. "You taking walk-ins?" The guy didn't look up. "1 sec." 2 minutes passed, then he turned around, finally acknowledging him. "What's up?" "Looking for a sandwich." "Turkey Club," the worker tapped the screen. "Name?" "Mason." The guy froze for half a second. "Like the owner?" Mason raised an eyebrow. "You know him?" "I mean, yeah, we got a poster in the break room. Must be weird working for someone you've never met." "Honestly, kinda." "But no offense, the name doesn't really come up." Mason nodded once. "I'll take that sandwich when you get a chance." While waiting, he stepped aside and scanned the room. A counter worker leaned on the back fridge door, scrolling through photos. A prep cook was on a personal call, speaking low in Spanish. The floors were streaked with dried soda. The condiment station hadn't been wiped in at least a day, but what caught his eye was the kitchen window. One employee moved with speed and purpose, organizing trays, checking temps, and cross-checking order tickets. Her name tag was slightly crooked. Alicia. "Turkey Club," the counter guy called out, dropping it into a paper bag. Mason took it, nodded, and walked out. He didn't eat it. Instead, he drove to the filing center and pulled Alicia's record. New hire, just under 4 months, no write-ups, no notes, mid-shift availability. Previous job, hospital cafeteria line server. He called the store. "Put Katrina on," he said. "She's off today," the guy replied. "She usually doesn't do Fridays." "What about the assistant?" "Don't think we have one right now, it's just shift leads." Mason thanked him and hung up. By 2 o'clock, Alicia's shift was ending. Mason waited outside. When she stepped out, he walked up. "Hey, you Alicia," she hesitated. "Yeah, I'm Mason Steller," she blinked. "You're him?" "I was in earlier. You're the only one who looked like they were doing anything." She looked down. "Just trying to keep things from falling apart." "Got a minute," she nodded. They sat on the curb near the alley, away from foot traffic. "Tell me honestly what's going on inside." "It's loose," she said. "There's no real leadership. People just do what they want. Katrina's barely around. The leads rotate, but they don't enforce anything. I tried to bring up food safety last week, and one of them said, 'We've been doing it our way longer than you've been alive.' Have you seen anything unsafe? I've seen expired sauce containers get relabeled. I've seen gloves used across multiple stations. One guy dropped a sandwich and served it anyway." Mason didn't interrupt. "I've tried to speak up, but it's like no one's listening. They just wait for the shift to end." He stood. "Wait here," he said. He walked back into the store and headed straight to the back. The counter guy from earlier saw him and straightened up. "I need your full name," Mason said. Why? I'm the owner. You're done here. You've been ignoring customers, violating safety, and letting the store run itself into the ground. You can't just, you're not being asked. You're being told, leave the apron and go." The guy threw the apron on the counter and walked out muttering. Mason stood in the center of the prep area. "Is there anyone here who's a designated lead right now?" A woman in her 30s stepped forward slowly. "I guess I'm up today. How long have you known about relabeling expired sauces?" Her eyes widened. You're also done. Grab your things." She didn't argue, just walked to the back room and disappeared. Mason turned to the rest of the crew. "This store is being closed for 24 hours for deep sanitization and retraining. Every employee will be interviewed individually next week. Anyone who's been complicit in cutting corners will be let go. Silence. He turned and walked out. Alicia was still waiting. You're now the acting lead for this store. You'll have a mentor assigned tomorrow. You'll be trained for full leadership within 60 days. She shook her head slowly. I'm not sure I'm ready. You were ready the moment you chose to keep doing things right when no one was watching. He paused. Go home. We'll start fresh Monday. She nodded quietly and walked off. That night, Mason sent a company-wide message, not a press release, not PR language, just a plain email written himself addressed to every employee. He acknowledged the cracks in leadership. The silence that let things slide. The moments when people like Valerie and Alicia had stepped up, even when the structure around them failed. And then he laid out what was next. A new leadership ladder built from the ground up. A zero-tolerance policy for apathy, disrespect, or unsafe practices. Employee feedback channels that bypassed middle management, and most importantly, a commitment. I will no longer lead from behind a desk, he wrote. You'll see me in stores on shifts with sleeves rolled up. The following week, Mason visited store 10 last on his list. He didn't need to go undercover. When he walked in, the team stood a little straighter. The prep station was spotless. The soup warmers were labeled and temp checked. A young man behind the counter greeted him with a genuine, "Welcome in." Mason ordered a bowl of wild rice soup. It came out hot. Fresh, perfect. He sat at a window booth, spoon in hand, and finally took a bite. No notes, no fixes, just soup the way it was supposed to be. He smiled to himself, then pulled out his phone. One last call to make. Valerie, he said. I need your help building something. You in? There was a pause. Yeah, I'm in. He hung up and looked around, not at the walls, not at the menu boards, at the people. Because his father had been right all along, the soul of a company didn't live in its numbers. It lived in the ones who showed up every day, still believing it mattered.